Welcome to the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. I'm your host, Stacey David. This podcast is brought to you by LMC Truck. Keep them on the road is their slogan, and they supply the parts to help you do that. Also, Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals and hot rods and enthusiasts alike. If you want quality tools, Cornwell's the place to go. Let's get to it. Well, I suppose most people have heard the news of the passing of Eddie Van Halen. Wow, what a tough day for not only the music world, but for the car world, because Eddie was a car guy, and most of the Van Halen members were car guys. The significance of Eddie Van Halen to the music world, you know, let me try to put it in perspective for you. You know, every once in a while, somebody comes along that completely redefines the way people look at either a certain instrument or something. And this has nothing to do with great people that are innovators. I mean, you've got your Jimmy Pages and your Jeff Becks and your Claptons and your Carlos Santanas and your Tom Scholz and all of these guys, your Steve Lukather's and all these great guitar players that will eventually end up in the Hall of Fame. But they don't necessarily reinvent the way that people look at an instrument. Those people are very few and far between. For example, the first one that I can think of is Chuck Berry. When Chuck Berry came along, he completely changed the way people looked at lead guitar, at electric guitar, and at singing and playing guitar. From then on, everybody has done some sort of Chuck Berry riff or lick or duck walk or something. He completely redefined the way people looked at electric guitar. Another one, Jimi Hendrix. You know, when Jimi Hendrix came along, people completely were like, what is this? And Hendrix didn't even have that many hits, but his style and his playing was so innovative that to this day, people use Hendrix style sounds and that kind of thing. Another one was, you know, that came from the country world was Chet Atkins. You know, there were other people that did the thumb and finger thing, but until Chet came along and kind of redesigned the way people looked at that, now if you're a guitar player, you've got to be able to do some Chet Atkins style feel in your playing if you're going to, you know, be able to play on records and that kind of stuff. Eddie Van Halen was that sort of player. When he came out, you know, he kind of invented the shredding thing, but he also, you know, he brought the tapping in, and there was something about the way he did it. People were like, whoa, you had to do that. Now, if you go into any music store, I guarantee you, if you sit in there for 10, 15 minutes, you will hear some dude start to play Eruption. Kind of like Stairway to Heaven. It's like, please don't play Eruption. But somebody will start doing that. They'll slap on a nice distortion sound, and that will be their gauge on like if they're hitting the Van Halen sound. And that is a compliment to Eddie. Now, one of the unique things about Van Halen is he wasn't just a mindless shredder. Had he have been that, he would have kind of disappeared like a lot of the guys that came after him. Van Halen was first and foremost a musician. When you look at the Van Halen hits, Panama and Hot for Teacher and all this stuff, he didn't just go off on mindless shredding solos. The stuff made sense. Matter of fact, the guitar work in their version of Pretty Woman is almost simplistic. And Eddie was a master of putting the right thing in the right song, doing just enough to where it fit. And that gave us some of the greatest rock songs of all time. And I know you guys will agree with me. I mean, you put in Hot for Teacher or something like that, you know, once you get past the drum that sounds like a Harley. I mean, those guys, they were masters at doing that. When you look at somebody and their musicianship, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And it takes a great artist to be able to figure out what to do. One of my favorite stories of Eddie is, you know, Quincy Jones brought him in to play on Michael Jackson's Beat It. you know, Eddie sat down and Michael was off doing some other song, and he laid that solo down that was just kind of a demo tape. Michael came back in and they were like, well, we kind of changed your song a little bit. We kind of thought this worked. And Michael was like, oh man, that's awesome. I love it. And Beat It, you know, was born the way it is. You know, when I first heard Van Halen, I was about 9th grade-ish, you know, and I was already starting to play professionally. You know, I was a big blues guy, you know, and I was a big Clapton fan, and, you know, and I was listening to all this stuff, and that was the thing. I was a real traditionalist. And I remember a kid at school comes to me, and he goes, well, you got to hear Eddie Van Halen. He's the greatest guitar player ever. Well, everybody was claiming that. I mean, people were like, well, Clapton's the best, well, Hendrix was the best, and Chet's the best, and Roy Clark's the best. You know, everybody was saying that. So I'm like, okay, I finally crafted songs, like stuff that David Gilmour was doing with Pink Floyd and that kind of thing. So immediately, you know, Roth's singing was crazy and this and that, and I'm like, oh, these guys, you know, this is just going to be a shredhead thing. We get in there, and the first Van Halen song I heard was Ice Cream Man.
I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by. Oh my, I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by.
And if you haven't heard it, you need to Google it. It's on that first album, that Van Halen album, and it's a straight-ahead blues song. And Eddie rips the crap out of this thing. And I was a fan from then on. I was like, wow. And this was even before all of the tapping and everything like that. Just his approach on that kind of song, immediately I could hear the musicianship. One of the things that was really cool about Eddie was his pick attack. You know, he was really good at getting those whistle tones and those harmonics and things like that at any given time, and that's all in how you're holding your pick. It wasn't just his left hand, his right hand was phenomenal too. So yeah, I just followed them, you know, all through those early years, and to me that was the great Van Halen. Now, when the song Jump came out, I was disappointed because I was like, what's he playing a keyboard for? Come on! I thought, personally, out of all the guitar solos that they put down, I thought the one on Jump was probably the lamest. It didn't really make sense. When you compare it to the solo in Beat It, which was like they actually fit it in there, the guitar solo in Jump was kind of like, what? Really? But the song was so good. And of course, it went on to become this great thing. And I love the song, and I loved it. But to watch Eddie playing keys on that, yeah, it was kind of disappointing. But once again, that goes to a guy that continued to stretch, continued to grow. I see a similar thing, you know, when you're building vehicles. If I just did Copperhead or Crazy Horse over and over and over and over, well, that would make me a really boring person, you know, as far as artistically. You know, you always want to keep pushing, and Eddie always did that. Like I said, great tribute to him. All we can say is, you know, thank you, Eddie Van Halen. Our hearts go out and our prayers go out to your family. We thank you for just sharing such an immense talent with us that will be with us forever. Thank you, Eddie. We can't even put into words how important you were to the music industry. You know, people ask me all the time, what kind of opportunities are there in the automotive industry? One, if you want to be your own boss, you might want to consider being a Cornwell tool dealer. I mean, they're always looking for people. They have routes everywhere. They're America's oldest tool company. They make the best tools in the industry, and they're a great company to work for. If you're looking to be your own boss, start your own business, and tired of cranking on wrenches, you may want to be a tool dealer.
Now, the dream cars of tomorrow.
Buick presents the sleek Centurion. Oldsmobile's elegant Golden Rocket. Pontiac's Club de Mer, open to the sky. And last of all, designed for the electronic highway of the future, the fabulous turbine-powered Firebird 2.
I think the concept car and the thing that it surrounds is hugely important, and we've lost a lot of that because people try to play things safe. And the thing that you have to remember about a concept car is that people are not looking at the whole car. The guys that are really looking at it, they're looking at those door handles or that particular grille treatment or the roof line, and they're incorporating that. And that's kind of what customizers and car guys have always done. We look at things, for example, guys will look at that Cougar, and some guys will go up and go, those frickin' door handles are awesome. Well, those are Kindig door handles, but they're based off the concept. I mean, a Tesla door handle is basically like that. And that's one of the best design parts of a Tesla to me. You know, so when you look at a concept car, it's not just the overall thing that a lot of people look at, just like a fashion show. People will look at it and go, well, the shoes or whatever that person is wearing is really what's speaking to me. The rest, it doesn't work. That, to me, is where the creative comes. And those guys usually get shot down. You know, Big Daddy Roth was a prime example. He was a real innovative thinker with the bubble top stuff. He did some crazy, crazy stuff, which today has now gone on to be iconic. But at the time, people were like, what the heck? And if you take like the Mysterion, it had like a TV in it, and it had the 2 engines, and it had all this stuff that as a collective car is part of that crazy era. But look how innovative he was thinking. It had adjustable suspension. It had a television in it, which we have now. You know, he was so far ahead of his time in some of that, you know, that it was just kind of space age type stuff. I would guess that if you looked back and if you followed some of the designs that have come out over the years, somebody was a Roth fan. And they slowly incorporated some of that stuff in there. So I think it's hugely important. I think it's one of the things that we've lost. Very rarely now do I see concept vehicles where they're real innovative like that most of them follow a kind of tried and true look. Right now the big smooth thing is the look, and it's kind of boring. I would encourage people to get out there, think outside the box, and just like, you know, true hot rodders do, if you see something that you like on a particular car, whether it be fins or door handles or the shape of the hood or whatever, incorporate that into your project. That's how great designs and great cars are built. You know, one question I get asked a lot is, what is a great first project for somebody? And my answer is always the same: an old truck. For several reasons. First of all, they're cheap, they're easier to find. It's okay if you drive them around all beat up. And there's great sources for parts from like LMC. They carry all kinds of stuff, whether you're doing a custom build, if you're doing an original build, if you're doing a full-on hot rod thing, you can find stuff in their catalog. So getting parts is not that hard. And they really support the truck life, which is, if you've never been into the truck world, as you start to dig into the truck life, you'll see that it's kind of represents Americana. So if you need parts, man, LMC is the place to go. All right, the question we've got here comes from Matt, and he's got a wiring question here. It goes, I am trying to fix up a 73 Dodge D100. That's cool. Like to know where I can get a new wiring harness. He says Painless doesn't seem to have a Dodge specific harness. Would you think their universal harness would do the job, or should I find a hot rod shop that can do a custom harness? A great question, Matt. When you're working on Dodges and less popular vehicles, that is a very common thing to run into. No, I don't think Painless has a specific harness, and I don't think they're designing one for that truck. Now, I know they do have them for Mopar cars. Something like that may be adaptable. I would talk to them about it, but definitely their universal harness would work. And I use their universal harness in most of my projects, especially their Pro Series, because it's so adaptable for whatever engine that you put in there. Unless I'm doing something back original, like this Jeep Scrambler or a CJ5, I don't use their specific harness because I do so much custom stuff. So yeah, I would definitely do their universal harness. Now, talking about going to a hot rod shop, nobody really builds a custom harness anymore. They start with a harness from either Painless or Ron Francis or whoever, because it's such a great starting point. To have to completely build a custom harness would cost you a lot of money. Now, the question is, though, if you are not real familiar with wiring, you still may want to take it to a hot rod shop and have them wire the vehicle for you using the universal harness. That way, you just take it to them and say, hey, you know, what do you charge me to wire this thing up and do it right? If they do that, make sure they keep a nice record of the harness, where everything is run. Don't just leave it to guesswork. Have them put together a custom wiring schematic of where all the wiring goes for that truck. So that way, when you get it back and a few years down the road, if you have to hunt down a short or whatever, you know how they've run the wiring. In other words, does it run down the driver's side? Does it go up under the hood and then split? And you know, how does it go to the back? You need to know that kind of stuff and keep track of it. But other than that, you shouldn't have any problem. And obviously, if you feel comfortable doing it yourself, by all means do it yourself. You'll save yourself about $1,000 using the harness as opposed to going to a hot rod shop. Hope that helps. Good luck to you. I'd love to see that Dodge when it's done. Question from Cole. Cole says, hey Stacey, I'm working on a 70 Chevy Custom 10 and installing weather stripping for the doors. He says the problem is one door won't shut all the way. Oh yeah, I've been there many times. I've already got the doors aligned and in place for the most part. Okay. And I'm just not sure how to get the one door to shut the whole way. It's making contact the most on the inside edge of the door close to the window. Any tips or suggestions? Yeah, Cole, anytime you put on new weather stripping, you're going to run into a bit of a problem because the weather stripping has to compress. Now, it kind of depends on the weather stripping that you've invested in, because not all weather stripping is the same. I would suggest getting stuff from a reputable place like Steel Rubber or something like that, that you know the rubber is going to be very close to original. Even if you get really nice rubber, it's going to be big. So what you have to do is shut the doors and let them sit shut for a while and kind of compress the rubber. Now you're going to run into that no matter what you do. Now, as far as your alignment issue here, you say you have the doors aligned and in place for the most part. Not sure what that means, but basically what you want to do when you align your doors out, you want to make sure that you're aligning them and keeping weather stripping in mind. When you align your doors out, you'll need to make sure that when they are fully adjusted would be when the weather stripping is on. And you can take little pieces of weather stripping and do this, or if you've done it, you can wing it enough to where things line up. Keep in mind the weather stripping is going to be an issue. Now, if it's just too tight, and I have had some vehicles, sometimes they've been wrecked, sometimes the weather stripping channel is whacked, or you just can't get enough weather stripping, sometimes you do have to trim the weather stripping down. And obviously you'll want to trim it on the back side where you're going to glue it so it will look right. But you just have to kind of sneak up on it and make it fit. But I think if you have your doors lined out good enough, slam that thing shut and let it sit shut for 2 or 3 weeks, and it will work itself in. And you should be good to go on that. Anyway, I hope this helps. Good luck to you on it. Keep in mind, this podcast is made possible by our friends at LMC Truck and our friends at Cornwell Tools. All right, that wraps it up for us today. It is time for you to get out there, start working on something, build something with your own 2 hands, send in your questions, send in your pictures, let us know what you're working on. All right, we'll see you later.